There's a question we rarely ask ourselves, even as we rush through our days, checking emails at red lights, scrolling through feeds in quiet moments, purchasing things we don't need with money we don't have, seeking validation from strangers, climbing ladders we never chose to climb. The question is this: what are we really running from? Not what are we running toward, because that answer comes easily. Success, security, recognition, love. But what are we running from? Because beneath every economic system, every marketplace, every transaction, every advertisement designed to make you feel incomplete, there's a wound. And that wound, more often than not, was opened long before you understood what money was, before you knew what productivity meant, before anyone ever told you that your worth could be measured, quantified, and compared. That wound was opened in childhood. And today, that wound runs the world. We live in an economic system that doesn't just exploit our labor or our time. It exploits something far more intimate. It exploits our unmet needs, our hunger for belonging, our desperate search for worthiness, our terror of abandonment, our belief, learned so early we can barely remember learning it, that we are only valuable when we are useful, only lovable when we are successful, only deserving when we are productive. The global economy, in all its complexity and power, is not built primarily on rational self-interest or the pursuit of prosperity. It is built on the unhealed pain of billions of human beings who learned, as children, that their needs didn't matter, that their feelings were inconvenient, that their authentic selves were somehow not enough. And so we spend our lives trying to become enough. We work ourselves into exhaustion. We consume endlessly. We compete ruthlessly. We sacrifice our health, our relationships, our peace of mind, all in service of an economic machine that promises us the one thing we never received as children: unconditional acceptance. But it never comes. Because the system isn't designed to heal us. It's designed to keep us hungry. Consider this for a moment. Every major industry that shapes our modern world, from technology to fashion, from finance to entertainment, operates on a single principle: create a sense of lack, then offer a solution. Make people feel inadequate, then sell them adequacy. Make them feel unsafe, then sell them security. Make them feel unseen, then sell them visibility. This isn't conspiracy. It's simply what happens when traumatized people build systems to manage their pain. And we are, almost all of us, carrying trauma from childhood. Not necessarily the dramatic, headline-grabbing kind, though many carry that too, but the quieter trauma, the trauma of emotional neglect, of conditional love, of parents who were themselves wounded and could not offer what they never received, of being told, implicitly or explicitly, that who you are is not acceptable, and so you must become someone else, someone more convenient, more palatable, more productive. The economic implications of this are staggering. When a child learns that their feelings are burdensome, that their needs are too much, that they must earn love through performance, something fundamental shifts in their nervous system. They begin to operate from a place of chronic activation, always scanning for danger, always trying to prove their worth, never quite able to rest. This becomes the template for their adult life. And when millions of people carry this template, it becomes the foundation of an entire economic order, an order that values constant growth over sustainability, accumulation over contentment, competition over cooperation, image over authenticity, doing over being. This is not accidental. This is trauma economics. Think about the smartphone in your pocket. A miracle of technology, yes, but also a perfect tool for someone who learned as a child that they must always be available, always responsive, always proving their value through productivity and connection. Think about social media platforms designed to trigger the same neural pathways that light up when a child desperately seeks parental approval. The like button is not neutral. It's a dopamine lever that exploits our deepest wound, the fear that we are not enough. Think about consumer culture, which tells us that the emptiness inside can be filled with purchases, that the right car or clothes or vacation will finally make us feel whole. This is the language of childhood trauma. The belief that something external can heal an internal wound. It can't, but the economy profits enormously from our attempts. The workplace is perhaps where trauma economics reveals itself most clearly. We glorify overwork, we celebrate burnout, we reward people who sacrifice their health, their families, their inner lives on the altar of productivity. And we shame those who set boundaries, who prioritize rest, who refuse to participate in the collective reenactment of childhood trauma, where love and worth are always conditional on performance. The modern workplace doesn't just extract labor. It extracts the part of you that still believes, at some unconscious level, that if you just work hard enough, achieve enough, produce enough, someone will finally say, you are enough. You are worthy. You can rest now. But that moment never comes in a system designed to keep you striving. Consider the financial industry, built on debt and speculation. Debt is a particularly insidious form of trauma economics. It traps people in a cycle of working to pay for things they bought, to fill an emptiness that cannot be filled with purchases. It keeps people tethered to jobs they hate, relationships they've outgrown, lives they never chose. It operates on the principle that your future labor can be monetized now, that your potential is worth more than your presence, that what you might become is more valuable than who you are. This is the logic of conditional love applied to money. And it keeps millions of people in a state of chronic stress, always one missed payment away from disaster, always running faster just to stay in place. The advertising industry understands trauma better than most therapists. Every ad is a carefully crafted message designed to trigger your deepest insecurities. You are not successful enough, not attractive enough, not interesting enough, not secure enough. Your home isn't good enough. Your body isn't good enough. Your life isn't good enough. But buy this product, and maybe, just maybe, you will be. The industry knows that wounded people are profitable people. People who feel whole don't consume endlessly. People who feel secure don't need status symbols. People who know their worth don't need external validation. And so the system has a vested interest in keeping us wounded, keeping us insecure, keeping us hungry for something that can never be purchased. Let's go deeper into how this begins. A child comes into the world with needs. The need for safety, for connection, for attunement, for mirroring, for acceptance. When these needs are met consistently and lovingly, the child develops a secure sense of self. They learn that the world is safe, that people are trustworthy, that they are inherently worthy of love and care. But when these needs are not met, when they are ignored or dismissed or met with hostility, when love is conditional on good behavior or achievement, the child learns something else entirely. They learn that their needs are a problem, that their authentic self is unacceptable, that they must become someone else to survive, and so they begin the work of self-abandonment. They learn to override their own signals, to ignore their exhaustion, to suppress their emotions, to perform and achieve and produce, hoping that somewhere at the end of all this striving, they will finally be acceptable, finally be enough. This is the wound that drives the modern economy, and it's everywhere. In the executive who works 80-hour weeks because his father never praised him, in the social media influencer who curates a perfect life because she learned that love came with conditions, in the consumer who shops compulsively because the emptiness inside feels unbearable, in the worker who cannot say no because boundaries were punished in childhood, in the entrepreneur who equates their net worth with their self-worth because that's the only metric of value they ever learned. These are not moral failures. These are adaptations to childhood environments that could not hold us in our wholeness. And when these adaptations become the foundation of an economic system, we get the world we have now. A world of extraordinary wealth and crushing inequality, of technological marvels and epidemic loneliness, of endless growth and ecological collapse, of constant connection and profound disconnection. The relationship between childhood trauma and economic behavior is not metaphorical. It's neurobiological. When a child experiences chronic stress, when their nervous system is repeatedly activated without resolution, when they live in a state of hypervigilance, waiting for the next emotional blow, their brain develops differently, the stress response system becomes overactive, the capacity for calm presence becomes underdeveloped, and this shapes everything about how they move through the world as adults. They become seekers. achievers, performers, always doing, rarely being, always striving, rarely resting, always proving, never settled. This is not a choice. This is a survival strategy that once kept them safe in an unsafe environment. But in adulthood, it keeps them trapped in a cycle of endless doing, endless consuming, endless seeking something they cannot name. The economy loves this. The economy needs this. Because an economy built on endless growth requires people who are never satisfied, who always want more, who can never rest into enough. If people woke up tomorrow feeling genuinely content, genuinely at peace with who they are and what they have, the global economy would collapse. Consumer spending would plummet. Productivity would fall. The entire system depends on your sense of lack, your belief that you need to be more, have more, do more. This is why healing trauma is actually a radical economic act. Because when you heal, when you reconnect with your authentic self, when you learn that you are inherently worthy regardless of what you produce or achieve or own, you stop participating in the system the same way. You stop buying things to fill an internal void. You stop working yourself into exhaustion to prove your value. You stop competing for scraps of recognition and validation. You come home to yourself, and the economy cannot profit from that. Let's talk about workaholism, because it's so normalized in our culture that we rarely recognize it as a trauma response. We call it ambition, dedication, success. But look closer. The person who cannot stop working, who feels anxious during downtime, who ties their entire identity to their professional achievements, who sacrifices relationships and health and presence for productivity, this person is not simply ambitious. They are reenacting a childhood dynamic where love and acceptance were contingent on achievement, where being was never enough, only doing mattered. They learned early that they had to earn their place, earn their worth, earn the right to exist, and now they cannot stop earning. Even when they have more than enough money, more than enough success, they cannot rest. Because the wound isn't about money or success. It's about fundamental worthiness. And no amount of external achievement can heal an internal wound that says you are not acceptable as you are. The technology industry understands this intimately. Every app on your phone is designed to exploit psychological vulnerabilities that often stem from childhood trauma. The fear of missing out, the hunger for connection, the need for validation, the terror of being alone with your own thoughts. These are not new human experiences, but technology has found ways to monetize them with unprecedented efficiency. Social media platforms are engineered to be addictive, and addiction is always a response to pain. We don't become addicted to things that make us feel whole. We become addicted to things that temporarily numb the feeling of unwholeness. The endless scroll is a pacifier. The likes and comments are a hit of validation. The curated feeds are a fantasy of perfection we can never achieve. And all of it keeps us disconnected from ourselves, from real intimacy, from the actual healing work of facing our wounds and learning to meet our own needs. Think about how we measure economic success: gross domestic product, quarterly earnings, stock prices, market share. Every metric is about more: growth, expansion, increase. There's no metric for enough, no measurement for contentment, no value placed on rest or presence or inner peace. This is trauma logic. The traumatized nervous system does not have a category for enough. It's always scanning for danger, always preparing for scarcity, always trying to accumulate security that can never be fully secured. And when this becomes the logic of our economic system, we get what we have: infinite growth on a finite planet, endless consumption in a world of limited resources. An economic model that is literally unsustainable because it's based on the dysregulated nervous systems of traumatized people. The wealth gap is also a trauma issue. When we look at extreme wealth accumulation, we often talk about greed or policy failures, and those are real factors. But there's something deeper happening. People who accumulate billions of dollars they could never spend in multiple lifetimes are not operating from a place of rational self-interest. They're operating from a wound. The wound that says no amount is ever enough, that safety can only be found in more, that worth is measured in numbers, that vulnerability is weakness, and power is protection. This is the logic of someone who learned very early that the world is not safe and other people cannot be trusted, and the only security is in control and dominance and accumulation. It's the logic of a nervous system that never learned to rest, to trust, to feel secure in simply being. And the rest of us participate in this system because our own wounds fit perfectly with its demands. We compete with each other instead of collaborating because we learn that love is scarce and there's not enough to go around. We buy status symbols to prove our worth because we internalize the message that worth must be proven. We work ourselves sick because we believe at some deep level that our value lies in our productivity. We compare ourselves endlessly to others because we were taught to see relationships as hierarchical, with winners and losers, worthy and unworthy. All of this serves the economy beautifully. A population of people competing for resources, seeking external validation, believing their worth must be earned. This is the perfect workforce, the perfect consumer base, the perfect foundation for an economic system that extracts value from human suffering. But here's what the system doesn't want you to know. Healing is possible, not just for individuals, but for entire ways of being in the world. When you begin to heal your childhood wounds, when you start to reconnect with your authentic needs and feelings, when you learn that your worth is inherent and not conditional, something shifts. You start to see through the messages that once controlled you. The advertisement that used to make you feel inadequate now just looks manipulative. The job that demanded your entire life now seems unreasonable. The competitive relationship dynamics now feel exhausting rather than normal. You begin to opt out, not through dramatic rejection, but through simple disinterest. The things that once hooked you no longer do. And this is terrifying to an economic system built on your wounds. If this message resonates with you, consider subscribing so we can walk this healing path together. Because what we're talking about here is not just personal healing, it's cultural transformation. Every person who heals their trauma, who learns to live from a place of enoughness rather than lack, who chooses presence over productivity, being over doing, authenticity over performance, that person becomes a crack in the foundation of trauma economics. They become living proof that another way is possible. And the more of us who do this work, the harder it becomes for the system to maintain itself. Let's explore what happens in childhood that creates these patterns. A baby is born completely dependent, completely vulnerable, completely unable to meet their own needs. Their survival depends entirely on the adults around them. And so they are exquisitely attuned to those adults. They learn to read facial expressions, tone of voice, emotional availability. They learn what behaviors bring connection and what behaviors bring disconnection. This is not conscious, it's survival level learning. And when a child's environment is consistently loving and responsive, they learn that the world is safe, that people can be trusted, that their needs matter, that they are inherently valuable. But when the environment is inconsistent, when love is conditional, when emotions are dismissed or punished, when the adults around them are themselves dysregulated and unavailable, the child learns something very different. They learn to become who they need to be to maintain connection. Because for a child, disconnection from their caregiver is not just emotionally painful, it's life-threatening. And so they adapt. They learn to suppress needs that are met with irritation. They learn to hide feelings that make adults uncomfortable. They learn to achieve and perform because that brings praise and attention. They learn to be helpful and accommodating because that keeps the peace. They learn to be small and quiet because that feels safer than being big and loud. Or they learn the opposite, to be dramatic and demanding because that's the only way to get noticed. Every child develops strategies to maintain connection and minimize threat in their specific environment, and these strategies become the blueprint for adult life. The child who learned that their sadness burdened their depressed mother becomes the adult who cannot access their own grief. The child who learned that their anger terrified their anxious father becomes the adult who people pleases compulsively. The child who learned that achievement brought the only reliable praise becomes the adult who cannot stop achieving. The child who learned that their needs were too much becomes the adult who has no idea what they need. These are not character flaws. These are brilliant adaptations to impossible situations. But they exact a terrible price, because in learning to be who we needed to be to survive, we lost contact with who we actually are. And that lost self, that authentic self that was buried for safety, that's what we spend our adult life seeking. Usually in all the wrong places. We seek it in relationships, hoping someone else will see and love the real us. But we can only show them the adapted self we learned to perform. We seek it in achievements, hoping that success will finally make us feel valuable. But the achievement only feeds the adapted self's belief that worth must be earned. We seek it in consumption, hoping that the right purchases will express our true identity. But we're buying based on advertising messages designed to exploit our insecurities. We seek it everywhere except the one place it actually exists, inside ourselves, buried under layers of protection and adaptation, waiting to be reclaimed. This is where the economic system really reveals its cruelty, because it offers us everything except what we actually need. It offers us products instead of presence, status instead of security, entertainment instead of engagement, distraction instead of depth, connection instead of intimacy. And we take what's offered because we don't know there's an alternative. We've forgotten what real nourishment feels like. We've been trained since childhood to override our authentic signals and accept substitutes, and the economy runs on those substitutes. Entire industries exist to provide temporary relief from the pain of self-abandonment. The food industry offers comfort in the form of engineered hyperpalatability. The entertainment industry offers escape from feelings we don't know how to process. The alcohol and pharmaceutical industries offer numbness when the pain becomes unbearable. The self-help industry offers the promise of becoming someone better, as if who you are isn't already enough. And here's the deepest irony. The more we consume these substitutes, the emptier we feel. Because they don't actually nourish the wound. They just distract from it. Real healing requires the opposite of what the economy offers. It requires slowing down, not speeding up. It requires being with discomfort, not avoiding it. It requires authentic connection, not curated performance. It requires learning to meet your own needs, not endlessly seeking external solutions. It requires coming home to yourself, not becoming someone else. And none of this is profitable. None of this requires purchasing anything. None of this benefits the gross domestic product, which is why it's so rarely encouraged or supported or even discussed. Think about the messages you receive every day, from advertisements, from social media, from workplace culture, from the general zeitgeist of modern life. The messages are consistent. You need to be more, do more, have more, improve yourself, optimize yourself, upgrade yourself, get ahead, don't fall behind, keep up, keep consuming, keep producing, keep performing. These messages are so ubiquitous that we mistake them for truth. We think this is just how life is, how reality works. But it's not. It's how trauma works. It's the voice of the wounded child who learned that they were not acceptable as they were and had to constantly strive to become acceptable. And that voice has been amplified and monetized and turned into the background hum of modern existence. But you can learn to hear a different voice. The voice of your authentic self, the voice that knows you are already whole, already worthy, already enough. This voice is quieter than the cultural noise. It doesn't shout or demand or threaten. It whispers. It invites. It simply is. And learning to hear it, learning to trust it, learning to live from it, this is the work of healing. This is the work that sets you free from the economic machine that profits from your pain. Let me be clear about what healing actually looks like. Because the self-help industry has sold us many false versions. Healing is not positive thinking. It's not affirmations or vision boards or manifesting abundance. Those things can be supportive tools, but they often bypass the actual wound. Real healing requires feeling the feelings you learn to suppress. It requires grieving the childhood you didn't have, the love you didn't receive, the acceptance that was always conditional. It requires rage at the injustice of being a child who needed safety and got chaos, who needed attunement and got neglect, who needed unconditional love and got performance demands. It requires terror as you face the vulnerability you learn to armor against. It requires shame as you acknowledge the parts of yourself you learn to hide. Healing is not comfortable. It's not quick. It's not something you can purchase or achieve your way through. It's a slow, tender, often painful process of coming back to yourself. And it's deeply threatening to the economic order. Because when you heal, you stop being the perfect consumer, the perfect worker, the perfect participant in trauma economics. You start setting boundaries, which reduces your productivity and your compliance. You start questioning the narratives you were sold about success and worth. You start choosing quality over quantity, being over doing, presence over performance. You start recognizing marketing manipulation and opting out. You start valuing your time and energy as precious resources not to be sold to the highest bidder. You start connecting authentically with others instead of competing. You start feeling your feelings instead of numbing them with purchases. You start resting without guilt. You start existing without constantly justifying your existence through achievement. And every single one of these choices is a small revolution against an economic system built on your wounds. The connection between personal healing and economic transformation is not abstract. It's immediate and practical. Consider the healthcare industry, which profits enormously from stress-related illness. When you heal trauma, when your nervous system regulates, when you're no longer living in chronic fight or flight, your health improves. You need fewer medications, fewer interventions, fewer emergency room visits. This is good for you, but bad for an industry built on sickness. Consider the food industry, which engineers products to hijack your reward system and keep you consuming. When you heal, when you reconnect with your body's actual signals, when you learn to nourish yourself rather than numb yourself, you stop buying those products. Your relationship with food becomes about sustenance rather than emotional management. This is health, but it's profit loss for corporations that depend on your dysregulation. Consider the financial industry, which traps people in debt. When you heal, when you stop trying to fill internal emptiness with external purchases, when you learn that your worth is not measured in possessions, you stop accumulating debt, you live within your means, you save. You choose financial security over status symbols. This is wisdom, but it's a threat to an industry built on keeping people financially dependent. Consider the entertainment and social media industries, which profit from your attention. When you heal, when you become comfortable with silence and solitude, when you no longer need constant distraction from your own thoughts and feelings, you spend less time on devices, less time consuming content, more time in actual lived experience. This is presence, but it's devastating to companies whose entire business model depends on capturing and monetizing your attention. See the pattern? Every step of healing is a step away from profitable behavior. And this is why healing is never going to be the message sold to you by mainstream culture. The culture needs you wounded. The economy needs you hungry. The system needs you believing that something is wrong with you that can be fixed through consumption, achievement, or external validation. Because if you realize that nothing is wrong with you, that you are inherently whole and worthy, that your pain comes from adaptations to childhood circumstances beyond your control, that healing is not about becoming someone else, but about reclaiming who you already are, you would stop participating in so many of the economic activities that keep the system running. This is why it's crucial to understand that healing trauma is not a self-improvement project. It's not about making yourself more marketable or productive or successful. It's about liberation. Liberation from the internal voice that says you're not enough. Liberation from the compulsive striving and achieving and consuming. Liberation from the belief that your worth must be earned. Liberation from the need to perform and please and prove yourself. This liberation is your birthright. It was taken from you through no fault of your own. And reclaiming it is one of the most important things you can do, not just for yourself, but for the possibility of a different kind of world. Imagine, just for a moment, what society might look like if most people healed their childhood trauma. If most people operated from a secure sense of self rather than wounded striving. If most people felt inherently worthy rather than constantly trying to prove their worth. We would have an economic system built on actual human needs rather than manufactured lack. We would value rest and presence as much as productivity. We would measure success not by accumulation but by well-being. We would prioritize relationships over achievements. We would create systems that support health rather than profit from sickness. We would design work that nourishes rather than depletes. We would build communities based on authentic connection rather than transactional exchange. This is not utopian fantasy. This is what becomes possible when wounded people heal. But we have to start with ourselves. We have to do our own healing work. We have to face our own wounds, feel our own feelings, grieve our own losses, reclaim our own authentic selves. And this is hard. It's hard because we live in a culture that does not support it, in an economic system that actively opposes it, in a world that will keep offering us substitutes and distractions and quick fixes. It's hard because the people around us, if they haven't done their own healing work, will often try to pull us back into old patterns. It's hard because our own nervous systems are habituated to the trauma responses that once kept us safe. The work of healing is the work of a lifetime, but it's the most important work there is. And you don't have to do it alone. In fact, you can't do it alone. Trauma happens in relationship, and it heals in relationship. Not the kind of relationships the economy offers, not the curated connections of social media or the transactional nature of the marketplace, but real relationships. Relationships where you can show up authentically, where your feelings are welcomed rather than managed, where your needs are met with care rather than dismissal, where you are accepted not for what you do or achieve or provide, but simply for who you are. These relationships are becoming rare in our culture, but they are essential. And part of healing is learning to seek them out, to cultivate them, to offer them to others who are also on this path. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice may support someone else's journey. Because this conversation we're having right now, this exploration of how childhood trauma shapes not just individual lives but entire economic systems, this is a conversation that needs to be had more widely. We need to talk about how the personal is economic, how the psychological is political, how our individual wounds connect to collective structures. We need to name what's happening. We need to see the system clearly. We need to understand that feeling inadequate is not a personal failing, but a profitable outcome for an economy built on lack. We need to recognize that our exhaustion is not weakness, but the logical result of living in a culture that demands constant productivity. We need to know that our struggles are not isolated, but connected to the struggles of millions of others who are also trying to be enough in a world designed to make them feel insufficient. And here's what gives me hope. Every person who heals, who wakes up to these dynamics, who starts living differently, creates a ripple. They become a model for others. They show what's possible. They demonstrate that another way of being exists. And slowly, one person at a time, one family at a time, one community at a time, the foundation of trauma economics begins to crack. Because it's not actually stable. It's never been stable. It's held together by our collective agreement to keep playing our assigned roles, to keep striving and consuming and competing, to keep abandoning ourselves in service of a system that promises but never delivers the love and acceptance we're really seeking. But the moment we stop playing, the moment we withdraw our participation, the moment we choose healing over productivity, being over doing, authenticity over performance, the whole structure wobbles. This is not about overthrowing the system through force or revolution. It's about something more subtle and more powerful. It's about becoming so rooted in your own worth that you can no longer be manipulated by messages of lack. It's about becoming so regulated in your nervous system that you can no longer be activated by artificial urgency. It's about becoming so connected to your authentic needs that you can no longer be sold substitutes. It's about becoming so present to your actual life that you can no longer be distracted by manufactured desires. This is the revolution, and it starts inside you. Let's talk practically about what this looks like in daily life, because all of this can feel abstract and theoretical, and healing has to be embodied, has to be lived. So what does it mean to heal childhood trauma in a world that constantly triggers it? It means noticing. Noticing when you're pushing yourself past exhaustion because some part of you believes you have to earn your right to rest. Noticing when you're comparing yourself to others because some part of you learned that worth is relative and scarce. Noticing when you're buying something you don't need because some part of you is trying to fill an internal emptiness with external things. Noticing when you're saying yes when you want to say no because some part of you learned that boundaries mean abandonment. The work begins with awareness and then it continues with compassion. Not the kind of compassion the self-help industry sells, which is really just more pressure to improve yourself, but real compassion. The kind that says, of course you're exhausted. You've been running from a wound for decades. Of course you feel inadequate. You were taught that you had to earn love. Of course you struggle with boundaries. You learned that your needs didn't matter. Of course you seek external validation. You never received internal mirroring. Real compassion doesn't demand that you be different. It makes space for you to be exactly as you are, with all your adaptations and defenses and survival strategies. Because those strategies worked. They kept you alive. They got you here. And they deserve honor, not shame. But compassion also makes space for something new to emerge. It says, those strategies were brilliant for that child in that situation, but you're not that child anymore. You're an adult now with resources and choices and the capacity to meet your own needs in ways that weren't available before. You can learn to feel your feelings instead of suppressing them. You can learn to speak your truth instead of performing what others want to hear. You can learn to rest without earning it. You can learn to take up space without apologizing. You can learn to want what you want without shame. You can learn to be who you are without constant self-improvement. This is the work. This is the healing. And it happens slowly, in small moments, over time. It happens when you choose to pause instead of pushing through. When you choose presence instead of productivity. When you choose authenticity instead of performance. When you choose your actual needs instead of manufactured desires, when you choose real connection instead of curated image, when you choose being enough over becoming more, each of these choices is small. But cumulatively, they change everything. They rewire your nervous system. They rebuild your sense of self. They reconnect you with your authentic life. And they opt you out of the economic machine that profits from your pain. Subscribe to stay connected with future reflections and healing explorations. Because this journey, this path of healing childhood trauma and reclaiming authentic life in a world that constantly demands otherwise, this is not a solo journey. We need each other. We need to know we're not alone in this work. We need to hear that others are also questioning the narratives, also setting boundaries, also choosing differently, also learning to be enough. We need community. Not the algorithmic community of social media, not the transactional community of the marketplace, but real community. Places where we can be seen and accepted and supported in our wholeness, not just our productivity. And as we each do this work, as we each heal and reconnect and reclaim ourselves, we begin to see the world differently. We begin to see how many of our social problems are actually trauma problems, addiction, violence, inequality, environmental destruction. These are not separate issues. They're all connected to the same root. The unhealed wounds of childhood playing out at scale. People who feel secure in themselves don't need to dominate others. People who feel whole don't need to consume endlessly. People who feel worthy don't need to prove their value through accumulation. People who feel safe don't need to control everything. Healing trauma is not just personal therapy. It's social transformation. It's the foundation of a different kind of world. But that world will not be given to us. It will not be sold to us. It has to be built from the ground up by people who have done their own healing work and are committed to creating structures and systems and cultures that support wholeness rather than profit from woundedness. This is long-term work, generational work, work that may not be completed in our lifetimes, but it's work worth doing. Because every child deserves to grow up in a world that welcomes their authentic self, that meets their needs with consistency and care, that teaches them they are inherently worthy, that allows them to simply be rather than constantly having to become. And the only way to create that world is to heal ourselves first. The economic system we have now will tell you this is impossible. It will tell you that human nature is inherently selfish and competitive, that scarcity is real and abundance is fantasy, that worth must be earned and only the strong survive. But these are not truths about human nature. These are stories told by wounded people who have not yet healed. The actual truth, the truth that emerges when you do deep healing work, is very different. Human beings are inherently social and cooperative. We evolved to care for each other, to share resources, to work together. Scarcity is often manufactured to justify inequality. Abundance is the natural state, where we're not hoarding out of fear. Worth is inherent, not earned. And strength is not about domination, but about vulnerability, about the courage to feel and to be real and to show up authentically, even in a world that punishes authenticity. This is what you discover when you heal. You discover that almost everything you were taught about how to be in the world was designed to keep you small and manageable and profitable. And you have the power to choose differently. Not easily, not without cost, but you have the power. The power to feel your feelings, the power to meet your needs, the power to speak your truth, the power to set boundaries, the power to rest, the power to be enough. This power was always yours. It was just buried under layers of adaptation and survival, and reclaiming it is your work, your sacred work, your revolutionary work. As we come toward the close of this reflection, I want to return to where we started, to that question. What are we running from? Because now, perhaps, the answer is clear. We are running from ourselves, from the parts of ourselves that were deemed unacceptable in childhood, from the feelings that were too much, from the needs that were too burdensome, from the authentic self that couldn't be safely expressed. We've been running for so long that we've forgotten what we're running from. We've mistaken the running itself for living. We've built an entire economy on this collective flight from ourselves. And that economy keeps us running, keeps us too busy to feel, too distracted to notice, too exhausted to question, too invested in the chase to realize we're running in circles. But you can stop running. Right now, in this moment, you can choose to stop, to turn around, to face what you've been running from. And when you do, when you finally slow down and look, you'll discover something remarkable. The thing you've been running from is not a monster. It's a child. A wounded child who needed love and got conditions, who needed safety and got chaos, who needed to be seen and got overlooked, who needed acceptance and got judgment. That child is still inside you, still waiting, still hoping that someday someone will come back for them. And that someone is you. You are the one who can finally give that child what they needed. You can meet them with love instead of rejection, with presence instead of abandonment, with acceptance instead of conditions. This is the healing. This is the return home. And when you do this for yourself, you stop needing the economy to do it for you. You stop buying security, validation, worth, love, because you're sourcing it from within. This is threatening to every industry built on your lack, but it's liberation for you. And it's the foundation of a different kind of world. A world where economies serve human well-being rather than exploit human suffering, where work is meaningful rather than extractive, where rest is valued rather than shamed, where relationships are authentic rather than transactional, where children grow up knowing they are inherently worthy, not that they must become worthy, where adults live from their authentic selves rather than adapted performances, where communities are built on care rather than competition, where success is measured in well-being rather than accumulation. This world is possible, but it begins with healing. Your healing, my healing, our collective healing. And so I invite you to begin, not tomorrow, not after you've achieved more or accumulated more or become more, now. Begin now. Begin by noticing what you're feeling in this moment. Begin by taking a breath deep into your belly. Begin by acknowledging that you're tired, that you've been running for a long time, that you're allowed to rest. Begin by questioning one belief you've held about your worth. Begin by setting one small boundary. Begin by choosing presence over productivity, just for today. Begin by being kind to yourself when you fail or falter or forget. Begin by remembering that healing is not linear, not quick, not something you can achieve your way through. Begin by finding one person you can be real with. Begin by letting yourself want what you actually want, not what you think you should want. Begin by honoring the child you were and the adaptations you made to survive. Begin by imagining the person you might become if you live from your authentic self. Begin here. Begin now. Begin. And as you walk this path of healing, know that you're not alone. Millions of others are also waking up to these dynamics, also questioning the narratives, also choosing differently, also reclaiming their authentic lives. We are not isolated individuals struggling with personal problems. We are a collective of wounded people beginning to heal together, and our healing is changing the world, not through force or revolution, but through presence, through authenticity, through the quiet, powerful choice to be enough, to rest, to feel, to need, to be real. This is the revolution. You are the revolution. And every moment you choose healing over productivity, being over doing, authenticity over performance. You are building the world that's possible on the other side of trauma. The economy that runs on childhood trauma is powerful, but it's not stronger than the human capacity for healing. It's not stronger than your inherent wholeness. It's not stronger than the truth that you are, and have always been, enough. This truth is what sets you free. This truth is what changes everything. And this truth is what I hope you carry with you long after this conversation ends. You are not broken. You are wounded, and wounds can heal. You are not inadequate. You are adapted. And adaptations can be honored and then released. You are not alone. You are connected, and connection is the ground of healing. You are not too much or not enough. You are exactly right. And remembering this, living from this, is the most revolutionary act available to you. So subscribe, not just to this channel, but to your own healing. Subscribe to the possibility of living differently. Subscribe to the courage it takes to feel and to be real. Subscribe to the community of others who are also walking this path. Subscribe to the vision of a world beyond trauma economics. Subscribe to yourself, to your wholeness, to your worth, to your authentic life. Because this is the work, this is the path, this is what heals not just individual lives, but the collective wound that drives our world. And you, reading these words, feeling these feelings, considering these ideas, you are part of this healing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. Thank you for choosing to be real in a world that profits from performance. You are enough. You have always been enough. And the world needs your authentic presence now more than ever.